Well, we begin with Conservative Leader Pierre Poilievre, who is facing criticism tonight for comments he made today about trans people. Poilievre was asked whether he would introduce legislation as Prime Minister to limit trans women's access to spaces such as female bathrooms and sports leagues.
Female spaces should be exclusively for females, not for biological males. You ask if I introduce legislation on that. A lot of the spaces you described are provincially and municipally controlled. So it is unclear what federal legislation what reach federal legislation would have to change them. But obviously, female sports, female change rooms, female bathrooms should be for females, not for biological.
Poilievre was also asked to comment on the federal government's forthcoming online harms legislation meant to combat hate speech and some violent material online. David Thurton takes us through those comments and the reaction from the Prime Minister.
Conservative Leader Pierre Poilievre was asked to comment about two pieces of proposed legislation. The first one seemed to be hypothetical. Someone at that news conference today asked him whether or not he would support a bill that bans transgender women from participating on female sports teams or using female changing rooms. To my knowledge, there's no legislation before Parliament Hill or a provincial legislature that is proposing this ban. Nevertheless, Poilievre was asked to comment about this. He said that female spaces should be exclusively for women, not biological males. He was then asked about online harms legislation, which we're expected to see tabled in the House of Commons sometime soon. He said Conservatives will oppose this legislation, calling it Justin Trudeau's latest attack on free speech by attempting to regulate hate speech.
What does Justin Trudeau mean when he says the word hate speech? He means speech he hates. Anyone who thinks that speech they don't like is going to be criminalized and therefore the bill should be supported, those people should go through the list of their own thoughts that Justin Trudeau considers to be unacceptable views, and you can assume that he will ban all of that as well.
Poilievre reminded Canadians that Trudeau was caught wearing blackface. That was before he became Prime Minister. It was revealed during the 2019 election campaign that Trudeau wore brownface, blackface. At the time, Trudeau apologized to Canadians, calling it racist. Nevertheless, Poilievre says that Trudeau can be no arbiter of what is hate speech when he was caught wearing racist, hideous costumes, Poilievre says. Now, the Prime Minister responded later in the day to Poilievre's comments. He says that his online harms bill is not about censoring Canadians, Trudeau says. It's about protecting minors.
What we're doing is actually protecting kids, and I look forward to putting forward that online harms bill, which people will see is very, very specifically focused on protecting kids and not on censoring the internet as misinformation and as the right wing tends to try and characterize it as. I think everyone, wherever they are on the political spectrum, can agree that protecting kids is something governments should be focused on doing.
Now, that bill, Trudeau says, will be tabled in the House of Commons next week, and he also said that Poilievre, of course, hasn't seen it, and he's already criticizing it. He says that Poilievre is only interested in hurling insults because he wants to distract from the fact that Trudeau says Poilievre does not have a plan to tackle climate change, childcare costs, or the housing crisis. David Thurton, CBC News, Ottawa.
Well, my next guest is the first openly transgender woman to play in the Canadian Women's Hockey League. She came out in 2018 while playing for the Toronto Furies. We've reached her in Clinton, Ontario tonight. Jessica Platt, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hi, thanks for having me, Travis.
Listen, I want to start by getting your reaction to the Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre's comments today that biological males should be banned from women's sports, change rooms, and bathrooms. What are your thoughts on that? How did you feel when you first heard those statements?
Well, my first reaction was disgust and a little bit of fear. I was in my car and I started shaking, and I just was trying not to throw up because I was so upset by the news. And a little bit of fear because we've seen how things have been going in the US right now, and I don't want it to go that way for myself or for anyone else who's got similar experiences as me. But that fear is something that motivates me to keep doing what I can to make the world a better place for trans people and for everyone in general. As a response, though, I wonder why some politicians seem to be making such a big issue out of this, where there's really no issue to begin with. As a federal politician, I think that Mr. Poilievre should be looking at more wider-reaching issues, such as climate change, the cost of living, the fact that some people working a full-time job can't afford rent and groceries, and the evolving wars in the world, rather than championing hateful policies targeted at a small portion of the population. This has the potential to endanger many in the trans community, and I don't think that people's lives should be used as a political chess piece, I guess.
Well, Elaine, let me ask you about that. Let me explore that a little bit more with you. Why do you think, then, this is part of the conversation that is going on right now in the country?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's part of the conversation going on in the country because, trans issues are relatively new. There's a lot of people who don't understand trans people or trans issues, and they're a little scared. And, they have these preconceived ideas that essentially trans women are just, men playing dress up. So I think the politicians on the right wing have seen the success that the Republicans in some of the states down south have been having, and see this as a potential to pander to that specific demographic. And we've seen that if you get that demographic riled up enough, that they're going to turn out and vote for you. So I think that's why this is being brought up so much recently.
Looking back at your own story, what situations did you go through as a transgender woman in sports? And were some of those situations difficult?
Right. Well, I personally was quite lucky with the community that I came out in. But growing up, sports was difficult. Playing the sport itself, it was great, but everything surrounding the sport was a little difficult. I didn't feel like I fit in, and it got to a point where it wasn't fun for me anymore. And a sport should be fun. It's a game. So I quit hockey for about 7 years to figure out what I had to do to be happy, and came back to the sport after. But like I said, I've been lucky in the sport that I came out in. Women's hockey has been incredibly supportive. The only hatred I've got is people outside of the women's hockey community who just heard that I was transgender, nothing else about me, didn't try and learn anything, just hated me because I was transgender. Nothing to do with my character or who I was, just that one aspect of myself.
Where do you hope this conversation goes in the weeks ahead?
I hope that, there's a lot more people coming out on behalf of trans people and defending trans people. And I'm hoping that some politicians such as Mr. Poilievre might take the time to become more educated, maybe speak to some trans women or some trans people based on their experiences. I, for one, would be happy to talk with him if he wanted to share my experiences. But in the coming weeks, I hope that people can be brought together instead of divided by this topic, because politicians, in my eyes, are there to lead the country. They're there to lead us, bring us together, unite us, not divide us.
Jessica, appreciate your time. That was Jessica Platt. She is the first transgender woman to play in the Canadian Women's Hockey League. We reached her this evening in Clinton, Ontario.